Welcome back to the U.S. Navy History Podcast. I am Dale, and I am joined by Kristoff.
Hello.
Hey,
Oh,
dude.
sorry. Hello, Captain. I meant to say hello after you finished, but I jumped the gun. Won't happen again. Well,
Yeah, it will.
yeah, let me rephrase that. Yeah, let's continue.
Usually I just, edit it to where it doesn't happen. But yeah, no. Audience, it
Yeah.
happens all the time.
Yeah, it does. It does. I'm just enthusiastic, you see. I want to be able to connect a listener, and the sooner I say hello, get that out of the way, we can get to your storytelling.
Yeah, you see, that's why I ordered him a ball gag for Christmas and somebody to remove it at opportune times
Mm.
and then reapply it.
It got lost in the mail. Wink, wink. Oh, no, I'm not supposed to wink at you. Uh, yeah, I got lost in the mail. We'll work it out.
All right, we're going to go back to our Enterprise coverage of every Enterprise known to history. Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
So, right now, do you remember which Enterprise we were talking about?
Okay, yes, it was the one that is, I think, currently being built after the first nuclear one. So there was the nuclear one, and then they recycled some of the steel from that one because it was decommissioned. And they are currently building another ship called the Enterprise, which is weird because I think all of its peers are named after people. And it's, I think, the only one, maybe one of two, that are named after a non-person. That one.
We already talked about that one. We moved on to another one.
Oh, dang it. Hold on. Which one was that one?
Well, it had one cannon for saluting. You remember that?
Yes, I do remember that. Man, I just because it's a smaller ship, I shouldn't have overlooked it.
No, you shouldn't have.
All right. Well, yes, let's continue talking about the Enterprise.
It was the steamboat built in 1814. The river steamer, remember?
Oh, yes, I remember now.
Oh, yes, you remember now.
Look, I believe it was crucial in the Battle of New Orleans during the War of 1812.
For supplies.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So now, are you ready to get underway to talk about the rest of her life?
Yes, I am. Thank you for catching me up properly. Me
Mm.
and the listener. Hey, how about that?
All right. So now she's going to take a voyage to Brownsville. So on February 4th of 1815, the British fleet, with all of the troops aboard, set sail for Mobile Bay, Alabama.
I got you. Not
On
the one
Feb-
that travels around. That would be
you,
ridiculous.
you got confused for a second. You had that confused look.
That's my regular look. Thank you very much.
Oh, hey. On February 16th, the U.S. Senate ratified the Treaty of Ghent, finally putting an end to the War of 1812. However, official dispatches announcing the peace would not get to New Orleans until late February. As it happened back then.
Yeah,
On March 1st, Shreve advertised in the Natchez newspaper that the Enterprise would ply between Natchez and New Orleans every 9 days until the first week in May,
Wow.
when she would depart New Orleans for Louisville. On March 13th, Andrew Jackson rescinded martial law. And on April 21st, payment of the wharfage fee for the Enterprise was recorded. Then on May 1st, John Livingston, I presume,
Yeah.
submitted a petition to the federal court accusing Captain Henry Shreve and the shareholders of the Monongahela and Ohio Steamboat Company of violating the territorial steamboat monopoly granted to Robert F. Livingston and Robert Fulton. John Livingston's petitioners requested a payment of $5,000
Whoa.
and the forfeiture of the Enterprise.
That's spicy meatball. I'm
I
gonna try
mean,
to venture a guess. $5,000 back then? I'm gonna say $63,000.
Let's see. Adjusted for inflation, 1814, $5,000 is the equivalent to
Oh.
$89,628.69 today.
And then plus forfeiting the ship. That's a lot of money.
Yeah, that is a huge amount of money. So, Sheriff John H. Holland, acting on orders issued by the court, quickly arrested Henry Shreve and seized the Enterprise. On May 2nd, attorney Abner L. Duncan, representing the shareholders of the M&O Steamboat Company, requested bail and made arrangements for Shreve and the Enterprise to be released. They bailed out a boat.
I didn't know you could do that.
I didn't either.
Man, I love this country.
Yeah, that boat better show up for court or it's going to have
I
an
know.
arrest warrant going out for it.
Exactly. It's gonna go on the lamb.
It doesn't like the land.
No, 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 lamb, like the baby sheep.
It doesn't eat sheep. It eats
Yet.
coal.
Yet. Oh
On May
gosh,
6th.
ugh, sorry. I just had a horrible picture in my mind of Kohlers shoveling lambs into the furnace.
You
Ugh,
did that to yourself.
I did. And sorry, listener.
On May 6th, Shreve and the Enterprise finally left for New Orleans, and after a voyage of 1,500 miles, reached Louisville on May 31st. The Enterprise was the first steamboat to reach Louisville from New Orleans. The Enterprise then steamed to Pittsburgh and then Brownsville. This was a distance of 2,200 miles from New Orleans,
Wow.
and it was performed against very powerful currents of the Mississippi, Ohio, and Monongahela River. The importance of this voyage was expressed in newspapers throughout the West.
That's cool.
So now they have to go back to New Orleans because if they don't, they're going to get arrested. They have to stand trial, both the captain and apparently the boat.
Well, thankfully it's down river, so it should be a faster trip.
Yeah. In August and autumn of 1815, Captain Lowndes, having replaced Captain Shreve, commanded the Enterprise during voyages to Ohio River ports between Pittsburgh and Louisville. In November of 1815, the M&O Steamboat Company leased the Enterprise to shareholder James Tomlinson for $2,000.
Whoa.
Tomlinson's son-in-law, Daniel Worley, became the captain of the Enterprise. The Enterprise is now bound for New Orleans and arrives at Shipping Port in grand style on August 21st, 1816. On the 25th, the Enterprise, with a cargo hold full of flour, whiskey, apples, and a number of passengers, departed Shipping Port bound for New Orleans. They reached there on February 27th. The Enterprise then completed a round-trip voyage, which returned again on April 5th. So the Dispatch, which is a boat that was owned by the M&O Steamboat Company, who owned the Enterprise as well, it steamed from Brownsville to Louisville under the command of a guy named Israel Gregg. At Louisville, they were like, "We don't want you anymore as captain. We want Henry Bruce instead. Get off, Henry, come on."
All right.
And he took the Dispatch to the port of New Orleans by February 13th of 1816. While docked at the landing, there was an incident. The first engineer, Robert Rogers, chronicled it in his autobiography. Quote, "We arrived early in the spring, and soon after we landed at the levee, Edward Livingston, together with the marshal of the district, with some others, came on board and informed our captain that they had the exclusive right to navigate the waters of Louisiana with steamboats, granted to them by the legislature of Louisiana, and that they did not allow their rights infringed. But as we pled ignorance of the law, they agreed if we would leave the state with our boat and not return, they would not prosecute us. We then took in our little freight and a few passengers and started for Alexandria at the rapids of the Red River. And after discharging our cargo, we returned to the mouth of the river, then took up the Mississippi for Pittsburgh. Now, accounts of this were published in newspapers all over the West. And during January of 1817, the Kentucky legislature responded to the sieges of the Enterprise and the dispatch by passing a resolution. And documents for the trial of the Enterprise had been transported aboard the dispatch were delivered to defense attorney Abner L. Duncan. On February 14th, Duncan submitted his supplemental answer to the judge of the district court for the first judicial district of the state of Louisiana. That is a mouthful.
Yes, it is. I'm very impressed.
So, May of 1816 is when the trial started. Judge Dominic A. Hall presiding. This was held in the old Spanish courthouse at 19 Royal Street. The plaintiffs were represented by John R. Grimes and the defendants by, again, Abner L. Duncan.
Okay.
Duncan submitted to the court Daniel French's 1809 federal patent for his improved steamboat engine that powered the Enterprise. He argued that this federal patent protected all the defendants, French, Shreve, and the shareholders of the M&O Steamboat Company, from the charges by the monopolists. On May 20th, Judge Hall, stating that the territorial legislature had exceeded its authority in granting the steamboat monopoly, dismissed the petition of the plaintiffs.
Good. I was hoping it was going to go that way.
A letter announcing the news of Judge Hall's decision and proclaiming the significance to the growth of steamboat commerce and the economy of the West was published in the Louisville newspaper. Now that the Enterprise has been held not guilty, she
Yes.
starts her final voyage.
Oh, man. Wasted the best years of that ship's life waiting to go to court. You know what I mean? Maybe not
Yeah.
years. What's time period? Anyway, final
So
voyage.
she's yeah. So she steamed from New Orleans under the command of Daniel Worley. She reached shipping port by August 5th of 1816. Because the Ohio River and the falls was too shallow for the voyage to continue, the Enterprise was anchored in Rock Harbor. We're going to let a historian named Thomas Shords go ahead and finish this up for us. The Enterprise finally reached shipping's port below the falls of the Ohio River. The river being low above and freights dull, the captain anchored the boat in deep water, and hiring 2 men to take care of her, went by land to Pittsburgh. One of the men went ashore and the other got drunk and neglected the pumps. The weather was hot. The seams of the boat opened, and the Enterprise filled and sank to the bottom, whereas Elijah Hunt, in a letter written in the year of 1851, says, "She still is." Elijah further states that while he was down in Kentucky in 1818, a man offered him $1,000 for the wreck, as he thought he could get her engine out to run a sawmill.
Interesting times. That's just, I don't know. It's just a different world, and trying to put myself back there sometimes is very difficult. And I'm like, hey, you know what? I'm going to give up the steaming business, run a sawmill. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
okay.
Yeah. So her legacy, she demonstrated for the first time steamboat commerce was practical on the Mississippi River and its tributaries. The trial that she undergone eliminated the ability of the monopolists to restrict competition. So she's like, no more monopolies.
Well, yes. Yeah. That's a whole different conversation I'm ready to have another time. But I'm glad that happened when it happened.
Yeah. She was relatively inexpensive to build. Reportedly, she cost $9,000 compared to the $38,000 for the New Orleans.
Wow, no kidding.
Mm-hmm. Due to her stern wheel design, she had the option to transport cargo by tying a barge alongside her.
Oh,
Since a
nice.
barge could be loaded and unloaded independently, no time was spent loading or unloading the Enterprise herself. Furthermore, a loaded barge could be picked up or delivered at places on the river that were not typical loading docks.
Hmm. That's pretty cool.
hmm And because of that, also the cargo and passengers added to her, the addition of a loaded barge would not increase her draft.
Makes sense. Wow, that's excellent. It's like the preliminary truck driving of the day,
Kind of.
bringing goods across the country.
Yeah. So that was the 1814 Steamboat Enterprise.
Nice. Impactful and important, and should not have been neglected by this podcaster. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Now we're going to get into another enterprise, which was a slave ship.
Oh, really?
Yes.
All right.
Let's see. So both the US and Great Britain had banned the international slave trade since 1807,
Mhm.
and both operated sailing patrols off of Africa and in the Caribbean to intercept illegal vessels and suppress the trade. The US preserved the right to operate ships for its domestic coast-wide slave trade among various markets along the East and Gulf coasts, which became increasingly important as the Deep South rapidly developed cotton cultivation. With the labor demand at a height, nearly a million enslaved African Americans were moved to the Deep South in a forced migration,
Hmm.
two-thirds through the domestic slave trade. New Orleans had the largest slave market, and its port was important for the slave trade and related businesses. In 1818, the Home Office in London had ruled that any slave brought to the Bahamas from outside the British West Indies would be taken. This interpretation led to British colonial officers freeing a total of nearly 450 slaves owned by U.S. nationalists from 1813 to 1842.
Hmm.
In incidents in which American merchant ships were wrecked in the Bahamas or put into colony ports for other reasons.
That's a long time frame for people to lose their slaves. I would think that after, I don't know, the first 10 years of that happening, they wouldn't go to the Bahamas anymore. If you're trying to keep your slaves.
Great Britain abolished slavery in August of 1834 in the British Isles and most of its colonies and their waters. Since the emancipation, Britain had advised foreign nations that any slavers found in Bermuda and the Bahamas waters would be subject to arrest and seizure. Their cargoes were liable to forfeiture without compensation.
Wow.
So that's going to bring us to the Enterprise. In February of 1835, 7 days out on a voyage between Alexandria, Virginia, and Charleston, South Carolina, the Enterprise, a brig, was driven off course by a hurricane and forced to put in for provisions at Hamilton, Bermuda, which was
Oh,
a British colony.
yes, it indeed.
When customs officers arrived on the large 127-ton ship on February 11th, they discovered it had a total of 78 slaves in what they reported were appalling conditions. Of course, they were appalling conditions. That's the only way they transported these poor
Yeah.
people.
Well, I always have to put in mind whenever I read appalling conditions and they recorded that centuries ago, it was even more appalling than I'm thinking. Like, appalling today is not appalling of the 1800s appalling. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
yeah. Appalling to
maybe,
us now is normal back then.
yeah, that's what's a luxury. Are you kidding me?
Yeah. Yeah,
But
you're
yeah,
right. It was
78 slaves probably in a space that accommodated comfortably 20, 30, and this is speculation on my point, mind you, but
Yeah. So the captives were not listed on the ship's manifest for cargo. Alexandria and Washington, D.C. comprised a major market for slaves from the Chesapeake Bay area of Virginia, Maryland, and Delaware, and being sold and shipped to the deep South. Most of the slaves on the Enterprise were owned by Joseph Neal, and they were highly valuable as they were young, American born, and spoke English. They were listed as mostly between the ages of 7 and 15 and 19 to 25.
hmm.
There were a total of 41 females and 37 males. The customs officials told Captain Smith that the slaves were illegal in Bermuda and subjected to forfeiture. They ordered him to bring them ashore. The British summoned a gunboat and Royal Navy forces to put the crew under armed guard. When Smith threatened to leave in defiance, local forces detained the Americans.
Why would you announce I mean, I get it's a nice punctuation. "Oh, yeah? Well, maybe I'll leave with my cargo of contraband." I think that was a really bad move.
Well, yeah, but of course, I'm sure, he's like, we just beat you twice in the last 50 years.
Uh-huh.
I think we're better than you. You can't do nothing to us. I'm pretty sure that attitude was prevalent.
Yeah, you know what? You're probably right. But, yeah. Okay, well, let's see how that works out.
A guy named Richard Tucker intervened. He was the Bermudian founder in 1832 of the local Black Young Man's Friendly Lodge, which was a mutual aid group. He obtained a writ of habeas corpus from the court, compelling the captain, Elliot Smith, to bring the slaves before the Chief Justice and answer for themselves whether they could proceed with the vessel to her destined port and continue slaves, or remain at Bermuda and be free. So the 78 slaves, many of them women and children, were removed from the ship to prepare for their court hearing. By the time they landed at Barks Bay Park near Hamilton, a huge crowd had gathered to greet them. Many of them had just been freed the year before and were excited to think the American slaves might gain their freedom. The Bermuda Supreme Court convened at 9 p.m. on February 18th to interview the slaves. That is pretty late for a federal.
Well, this is British parliamentarian stuff. I don't know. I think they have different rules.
The hearing lasted until midnight in a packed room. A large crowd of locals attended the session. Bermuda's Chief Justice Thomas Butterfield interviewed the slaves individually and asked whether they wished to return to the U.S. and slavery or remain in Bermuda as free persons. During this session, the court heard that many of the people had been free blacks in Maryland and that raiders had kidnapped and sold them into slavery.
Ooh.
A woman with her 5 children named Wrigley actually chose to return to the United States, but the remaining 72 people chose to stay in Bermuda. So that night, on February 18th, 1835, the Supreme Court freed them. A journalist that was present wrote, quote, "It would be difficult to describe the sense of joy and wonderment that prevailed."
Yeah, I bet. I'm surprised it wasn't unanimous, but, going from a station of enslaved, appalling conditions, especially if you had just been kidnapped and you were formerly free, just to have all those rights eliminated, and then the salvation of a hurricane to push you to Bermuda and deliver you your freedom via the government of I guess, the British Empire. That's amazing.
Yeah. And if I had to guess, the only reason I would think that Mrs. Wrigley would want to return to the US is because they didn't say anything about her husband.
Mm,
So
right.
possibly she wanted to get back to the US to maybe try to find and get back with her husband.
That's that's dedication.
It is.
That's like literally when someone says, "I'm willing to give up my life for you." That's what she did.
Yeah. So this case contributed to the tensions arising between Great Britain and the U.S. over the question of slavery during the period after it had been abolished in Britain and her colonies.
Mhm.
The U.S. continued it as a domestic trade and profitable institution in the South. This was only one of several incidents in which British officials in Bermuda or the West Indies freed slaves owned by Americans. Both the U.S. and Britain worked to suppress the international slave trade from Africa, but the U.S. wanted to protect what they already had. And also, they wanted some kind of protection if weather or accidents drove their boats into British ports.
Makes sense.
Yeah. That is the slave ship enterprise.
You know, it's one thing I really like about this podcast, besides the fact that I'm on it, is that we try to show all of the history, regardless of if it makes the United States look bad or not.
Yep.
History is, it should be as viewed as unvarnished as possible to draw the proper conclusions. And I know that's going to be hard for us given the sources that have made it through. Every source is biased, and I understand that. But it's still important to like just, hey, this is what happened. And then we can opine on it ourselves.
Hmm. Yeah. It's important to know what actually happened
Right.
as close as we know with information that's left.
Right. Exactly. Yes.
All right. So the next enterprise, you want to guess what this one is?
Okay. Yes. I bet it is. I'm going to say a shrimp trawler merchant marine.
No. It's a
Ah,
yacht.
no way.
Yes.
Hey, one man's
Let's
shrimp
see.
trawler is another man's yacht. So, hey.
Yeah. All right, let's get into her statistics.
All right.
She was a J class yacht.
What does that
It- it-
mean?
It's a racing yacht.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
It is considered to be the apex of the era when the universal rule determined eligibility in the America's Cup.
Okay.
She had 4 sails. She was designed by Starling Biergress. She was built by Herrenschaft Manufacturing Company, launched April 14th of 1930. She was owned by the Winthrop Aldrich Syndicate and was scrapped in 1935. Her captain was Harold Vanderbilt. Uh, she won the 1930 Americans Cup.
Wow.
She displaced 128 long tons. She was 120 feet 9 inches long, 80 feet at the waterline. She had a beam of 22 feet 1 inches, a draft of 14 feet 6 inches, and her sail area was 7,583 square feet.
Hmm. That's
All right.
impressive.
Yeah. Let's see. All right. So when the New York Yacht Club accepted Sir Thomas Lipton's challenge for the American Cup, they decided to form 2 syndicates to build 1 yacht each for the defense of the cup, and also to welcome other syndicates who might want to offer a defender. The 2 New York Yacht Club syndicates were to be led by Vice Commodore Winthrop Aldrich and Rear Commodore Janus Morgan. The syndicate named Harold S. Vanderbilt as their captain and engaged Starling Biergris to design the yacht and the Herrschaft Manufacturing Company to build it. Vanderbilt proposed that Biergris base his design on an enlarged version of the M class sloop Prestige. that Bjerges had previously designed for Vanderbilt. However, when Bjerges presented two models of an 80-foot sloop design to the syndicate for consideration in August, neither of them looked like the Prestige. The syndicate members unanimously selected one of the two designs as the basis for their Defender. The precise waterline length of the yacht was fixed after analysis of historical meteorological data to predict the likely wind conditions during the races. They're getting all sciency with it.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, well, you get a challenge from a knighted bloke from the UK. You're not going to mess around.
Hmm. They also did experiments with a 15-foot model hull at the Naval Model Basin based on the selected design. Using the data from these tests, Bjerges calculated the drag on the hull design as it was progressively scaled up at 1 foot increments from 78 feet to 87 feet at the waterline. By this method, he determined the minimum drag under predicted conditions would be generated with the hull scaled to a waterline length of 80 feet. To maximize the sail area, Enterprise's mast was designed to the maximum height allowable under the racing rules
Of course.
of 152 feet 6 inches. Based on this mast height, a boom length of 66 feet 6 inches was selected after consulting with George Ratsey of the sailmaking firm Ratsey and Lapthorne.
So fascinating. Yeah, the industries that are around to support this endeavor.
Hmm. Three masts were constructed for comparison, two wooden masts of different design from Nevins, and an innovative 12-sided duralumin mast from aircraft builders, Glenn L. Martin Company. This
Uh,
mast was 600 pounds lighter than the lighter of the two wooden masts, and 1,000 pounds lighter than the heavier of them.
Whoa. Yeah, aircraft. This was the 30s, right? I mean, aircraft was not. They were just hitting their stride. Eh, eh, This is very infant. Yeah, this is amazing how all this stuff's coming together to make this happen.
Hmm. Biergraphs then suggested using 19 strand wire for the Enterprise's rigging to achieve a 33% saving in weight.
Hmm.
This required the development of new fittings for the ends of the lines because the wire could not be spliced.
Right.
The result was a fitting called True Lock, developed for this project by the American Cable Company. The sails included four main sails that were ordered from the Radsey and Lapthorne Company. The Enterprise's winches came mostly from the Resolute, which was the 1920 America's Cup Defender. Also, some of these winches had actually been previously used on the Reliance from the 1903 Defender. So some of these winches were 17 years old.
I mean, they're talking about Defenders from the early 1900s. I knew, like, I only learned about the Cup maybe in the late 90s. And I thought, oh, it's probably been going on for what, 40 years or so? But this is decidedly earlier than that.
Yes. Her construction was of steel frames and deck beams with wooden decks, and a hull was built from very expensive Tobin bronze.
Hmm.
It is estimated that she cost $1 million to build.
Gosh.
That's about 18 million in 2022 dollars.
Golly, okay. That's a lot of money. But I do like efforts that spare no expense that kind of push the limits of what technology can do. Like we're already learning about the new fittings for the cables and uh, experimenting with different masts and using aluminum from the aircraft industry. Like this is stuff that would have been slower to have been adopted unless, I don't know, unless you went all out. And so this is kind of cool.
Yeah. They got, it's like NASCAR for the water.
Yes, exactly.
They're going to put the money into the boat to win.
Or yeah, or F1, like, there's just n massive amounts of technology that they pour into those machines to the point that it's a finely tuned, um well, I don't wanna say machine because I just used that word, but, like, the whole assemblage of people, the whole team and the technology and the guys in the back crunching the numbers, it's a system that's incredible, and
Mhm.
this sounds similar.
So they placed the order for the Enterprise on August 1st of 1929 and was given the project construction number of 1146. She was launched at 0800 on April 14th, 1930, and christened by her sponsor, Harriet Ulrich. The Rhode Island governor, Norman S. Case, attended the launch. So, in addition to the Enterprise, she had several support vessels. These included the motor yacht Vera, who was owned by Vanderbilt himself, and she was used as living quarters for the afterguard. The Corona, which had been built as Colonia, which unsuccessfully competed against Vigilant to become the America's Cup defender in 1893. And she was refitted to serve as Enterprise's mothership, providing living quarters for her crew and storage for her sails and rigging. Uh, Mutt, a old pilot boat fitted with a single cylinder engine to act as a crew ferry, and the Bystander, a specifically built 42-foot, 175 horsepower motorboat to act as a tender and to tow Enterprise and Corona as needed. Her crew. So under the racing rules, yachts were allowed a total crew of 31, which included any afterguard. The afterguard comprised of Winthrop Aldrich, Harold Vanderbilt, Starling Burgess, Charles Bubbles Havemayer, C. Sherman Hoyt. So there was going to be a total of 26 regular sailors with the 5 officers. The sailing master, George Monsell, the first mate, Harry Clave, second mate, Adolph Nelson, and the third mate, Ole Larson. The Enterprise sailed for the first time on April 19th, 1930, with her full crew and a number of guests. From then until May 9th, she was taken out almost daily in increasingly long and demanding sails. Beginning on May 10th, Walter Clark had arranged for his yacht, the Resolute, to race against the Enterprise to evaluate the new yacht's characteristic and provide training for her crew. Before the first of these races, a Mrs. Churchman of Philadelphia, who was a friend of Clark's, presented the crew of the Enterprise a Hamsa, and that became the boat's mascot and was fixed to the side of the navigator's cockpit.
What is a hamsa?
It is a palmed shaped amulet popular throughout North Africa and the Middle East.
Huh.
It is also known as the Hand of Fatima.
So similar to the amulet in Raiders of the Lost Ark, I'm imagining
It
that size.
it depicts an open hand, and then it's got like beads and an eye and things of that nature.
Okay. Cool.
3 days after that, Enterprise began to practice against the Vanite as well. These mock races were significant because of a opinion that the sturdier and heavier build of the Enterprise would make it slower than the previous generation of yachts. But yeah, they soon found out that that was absolute BS. The Enterprise beat them every time.
Wow, no kidding.
All right. So on June 9th, Enterprise got to Glen Cove for a series of races planned in the Long Island Sound by the local clubs. Here, she first raced against the 3 other yachts built as contenders to defend the American Cup: the Witomi, the Whirlwind, and the Yankee. They were also joined by the Resolute and Vanity during this series. This is the Enterprise decided to race with her light wooden masts during this. Of the series, Wheatamui won 3 of the 4 races, with the last one going to the Enterprise.
Hmm.
This convinced Bjergres and Vanderbilt that the Whirlwind and Yankee were not a serious threat to the Enterprise due to their longer waterline lengths.
Okay.
The next week, the boats traveled to Newport for 3 races organized by the Eastern Yacht Club. The Enterprise beat them all.
Really?
Mhm. As the winner of the races, the Enterprise was awarded the Commodore Charles P. Curtis Cup.
Nice.
Yeah. Now, after the races on July 26th, the Enterprise was nearly wrecked twice in one day
Oh,
while practicing near Jamestown. First, when they were caught in an ebb tide that nearly carried her onto the Dumpling Rocks, and then when a mechanical failure with her rigging nearly forced her aground in the Narrows.
that would have been disaster.
Yeah. On July 2nd, the Enterprise was fitted with her airframe masts.
Oh. So all this winning in these local races, or I guess not all winning, but all the races were done with the lighter wooden masts. I know it did it with the first set of races where it won 1 out of 4, but even when it beat all comers in the Newport races, it had the light wooden mast?
Yes.
Wow. Oh, man, they're about to turn it up a notch. This is exciting.
Mhm. Alright, so during the first 2 weeks of July 1930, the American Cup Committee staged a series of observation races so they could get to understand the strengths and weaknesses of the 4 contenders to defend the cup. The races were conducted by starting the yachts in pairs, with the second pair starting 15 minutes after the first, and the yachts to race in each pair were determined by lot. The results of these observations were that the Enterprise, Weetamo, and Yankee all finished roughly the same, points wise, while Whirlwind had won only a single race and finished with only 8 points,
Mm.
while the Enterprise had the best at 14, the Weetamo at 13, and the Yankee also at 13. So from August 2nd to 9th, the 1930 annual cruise of the New York Yacht Club offered a final opportunity for the contenders for the defense of the America's Cup to compete with each other prior to the selection trials. The cruise consisted of several port to port legs, interspaced with races over set courses. Both the Enterprise and Weetamo each won 3 races, and the Yankee won 1. The Enterprise won the Astor Cup, and the Weetamo won the City of Newport Cup.
I wish I was more familiar with those cups, more tuned in so I could go, "Whoa, that's really impressive." But I
Hmm.
have no idea if that's impressive. It sounds impressive. It's like, "Okay, that's cool," but
Yeah. So they weren't done refining the Enterprise.
oh,
They Another refinement that they did is a innovative boom design by Bjergres. The optimum profile for a sail is curved, like an airfoil.
yeah,
But in the Marconi rigs of the day, the foot of the mainsail was fixed all along its length to the rigid straight boom.
okay,
As a result, the lowest third of the sail and the part with the greatest surface area was flattened and therefore not used to its greatest advantage.
makes sense.
Bjergres's solution was to commission a very wide boom, which was 4 feet across, tapered at both ends, and triangular in a cross section. The boom was mounted with a flat side upwards, and this surface had transverse metal tracks laid into it, crossing the boom at 18-inch intervals along its length. So instead of the foot of the mainsail being fastened directly to the boom as in the past, it was attached to sides that were free to move along the tracks from one side of the bottom to the other.
Oh, that's cool.
This mechanism allowed the mainsail to be shaped to maximize its efficiency, and pegs could be inserted into the surface of the boom to constrain the foot of the sail in particular shape. The crew painted color coded lines along the boom to indicate the correct peg placement for three different degrees of curvature. The width of the boom earned its nickname the Park Avenue Boom. This was fitted on August 10th, and tests began that exact day. They were like, "We're not waiting. We need to get this thing out."
Oh, yeah, for sure.
3 days later, the crew was very happy, and they were like, "Yeah, we're going faster with this new boom, even though it is heavier than a normal one."
Yeah. I mean, it's a
Uh,
trade-off, but
it-
it's definitely a better upside.
yeah, it's 16% heavier,
That's significant.
but because of the new rigging they were using,
Oh, yeah.
give and take. The final major modification Enterprise came on August 14th with the fitting of a new rudder with a smoother surface and substantially smaller area. The smaller rudder reduced Enterprise's wetted area by 1%, reducing drag. The disadvantage was that she handled a whole lot worse.
Oh,
Yeah. So formal trials between them commenced on August 20th, and they were to race in pairs. Due to poor winds, only two trial races were held, both of them won by Enterprise.
oh, nice.
On the evening of August 27th, the American Cup Committee informed the afterguard of Enterprise that their yacht had been selected to defend the Cup.
Nice.
The four races for the America's Cup were pretty much uneventful. One boat, the Shamrock 5, had to withdraw from the third race when her main halyard broke. But the Enterprise won all four races.
Whoa.
Shortly after the America's Cup competition, the Enterprise was dry docked, never to be put in water again.
Oh. I can see that with racehorses, don't need to race them anymore, but what would you do with a boat that just won the America's Cup? Just let it sit?
Put it in a museum.
Is that where it
Y-
is now?
Oh no, she was scrapped.
Oh, no. Well, it was the Depression. They
Yeah,
had to use everything.
she was scrapped in 35.
I was paying attention to the years, and the commissioning and the funding and everything happened right before the stock market crash in 1929, and I was like, "Oh, okay."
Hmm. All right, so that is the yacht
Well,
Enterprise.
there we go.
All right, so we have more Enterprises to go. We have six more Enterprises
Ooh.
if we, avoid the fictional Enterprises.
Right, I was gonna ask.
All right. So we're actually going to stop today. We're going to end it here, and we're going to get into the next enterprise next time. But we like to end every one of our episodes by honoring one of our fallen angels. And with the help of herocards.us. So today we want to honor Sergeant First Class William B. Bryan Woods Jr. His hometown was Chesapeake, Virginia, served in the U.S. Army, 2nd Battalion, 20th Special Forces Group, Green Beret. He received a Bronze Star and Purple Heart. His date of sacrifice was August 16th, 2009, killed in action in Ghazni, Afghanistan. Sergeant First Class William B. Bryan Woods was deployed in support of Operation Enduring Freedom in July of 2009. As a member of the Combined Joint Special Operations Task Force, Afghanistan, he was a Special Forces Senior Medical Sergeant. Woods' commanding officer Michael Waltz wrote of Bryan's courage in an opinion piece for the St. Augustine Record. On a hot day in the middle of August, Bryan's team, together with an Afghan police unit, went on a mission to help Afghan villagers reopen a bazaar in the Ghazni province in eastern Afghanistan that had been shut down by the Taliban. Danger was high in this region. One wrong move could mean setting off an improvised explosive device, cutting the mission short and putting everyone's life at risk. Still, Brian and his team carried on. They began taking fire from across the field. When his heavy armor vehicle got stuck, Brian remained mission focused and courageously set out on foot. He could have stayed in the vehicle. He could have sent the Afghan police out front, or he could have hung back as the unit's only medic, any of which would have been acceptable. For months, Brian had often thought of his own death, writing over a dozen letters to his wife, children, and fellow Green Berets. Despite these premonitions and despite the risk, Brian didn't sit back and wait. Instead, he led the charge ahead in the face of the enemy. It was an amazing testament to him as a soldier, as a man, and as a hero. So, Sergeant First Class William B. Brian Woods Jr. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, take us out.
All right. Well, hey, listeners, thank you so much for hanging in with us and learning a little bit more about the name Enterprise and all of its different manifestations. If you want to contact us or learn more about what's going on, or if you have maybe you have raced in the America's Cup and you have an insight as to what that process is like, drop us a line. You can email us at usnavyhistorypodcast@gmail.com. We're also on X/Twitter. You can find our handle at USN History Pod. And we also have a Discord where you can have an interactive discussion with us and other listeners. And you can talk about, I don't know, monopolies and their danger, or the UK being the primary force in the ending of the global slave trade. Whatever. We're here. You can talk about whatever you want. Uh, Lastly, if you could rate and review and tell a friend, we would greatly appreciate that. Thank you. Dale?
All right. As always, we want to wish you guys fair winds and following seas. Bye.
Bye-bye.